The containment field collapsed at exactly 47% efficiency, which meant they had 4 minutes before the entire engine test facility became a crater. Kyle Thas watched the readings cascade across every display. Temperatures climbing past safe thresholds, pressure systems screaming into the red, the experimental propulsion core burning hotter than the surface of a dying star. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. 15 years. 15 years of collaborative research between 3 species. And it was about to detonate across 17 different monitoring systems simultaneously. "Emergency protocols," he shouted, his secondary arms gesturing frantically at the control array. "Activate full containment. Now." Vexia's voice cut through the chaos, tight and precise. "Containment field is degrading. We have 4 minutes before cascade failure reaches critical mass." The doors to the observation bay hissed open. Olivia Smith walked in, holding a mug of coffee. She wasn't running. Wasn't even moving faster than a casual stroll. She simply existed in the space between one catastrophe and the next, taking a sip from a beverage that smelled like burnt charcoal and broken dreams. "Give me 90 seconds, she said. Kyle Thas made a sound that might have been laughter or a death rattle. He wasn't entirely sure which. "The core temperature is approaching ignition. We need full system shutdown, emergency cooling protocols, and—" Yeah, I heard the pretty alarm noises," Olivia interrupted, already moving toward the primary engineering station. 90 seconds. Stop talking." She set her coffee down on the console. On the console. On top of 3 decades worth of calibrated, irreplaceable equipment. She hasn't even accessed the terminal. Someone screamed from the monitoring pit. Olivia didn't access it. She walked past it. She walked directly to the manifold junction, the physical component that every algorithm said was operating within nominal parameters, the part that all 15 years of optimization insisted was perfect. She reached out and touched it. Just touched it. Her hand flat against the metal, her eyes closed like she was reading something invisible written directly into the alloy itself. "Stop!" Kyle Thas lunged forward. "You'll trigger cascade failure. The resonance frequency will—" "Or I'll prevent it," Olivia said calmly, her eyes still closed. "Same thing, really. Give me a second." Her fingers moved, deliberate, precise, not following any procedure in the technical manual, not consulting a single readout, just adjusting something that the instrument swore was already perfectly adjusted. The alarm sounds shifted pitch, then lowered, then stopped. The temperature readouts began descending. Pressure systems eased back into amber. The core's burn intensity dropped like someone had flipped a switch that only one human in the galaxy apparently knew about. By the time Olivia opened her eyes and stepped back, taking another sip of that horrible coffee, every single metric had normalized to operational baseline. "The containment field is stabilizing," Vexia whispered, as if speaking too loudly might break whatever impossible thing had just happened. "Temperature's descending. Pressure it's perfect. All systems are perfect." Kael'thas stared at Olivia, then at the manifold, then back at Olivia. What exactly did you—" "The bearing was stressed wrong," Olivia said, like she was discussing the weather. "You could feel it if you actually touched it, instead of just reading numbers about it. It was fighting itself, generating harmonic feedback, which was pushing the cooling systems into compensation cycles, which created the heat spike. Classic cascade that nobody sees because everyone's watching the readouts instead of the actual thing." She took another sip of terrible coffee. Also, you might want to install real-time pressure sensors on that manifold. Your instruments are off by about 0.3% on the resonance frequency. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to make the system run hot for years without anyone noticing. Behind her, every alarm had stopped. In front of her, every expert was silent. Above them, the engine core hummed, perfectly, impossibly, onward. The engine test ran for exactly 47 minutes before completing its full cycle, and every single metric exceeded projections by 23%. Not by a margin of error, not by an unexpected variable that the engineers had somehow miscalculated. By 23% across the board. Efficiency, thrust output, fuel consumption ratios, thermal distribution, everything. All of it better than it had any right to be. Kyle Thas stood before the final readouts and couldn't form words in any of his 3 languages. "How did you," he began, then stopped, started again. "What exactly did you?" Another pause. His secondary arms moved in the gestured equivalent of intellectual surrender. "I don't understand." Olivia was already walking toward the observation bay exit, her terrible coffee now sitting forgotten on the console. Felt wrong, sounded wrong, fixed it. What, you guys were just gonna let it explode? The autonomous systems were already calculating compensatory adjustments, Vexia said quietly, running through the diagnostic logs for what felt like the 100th time. She looked up from her display, and there was something like awe in her expression. The systems should have prevented cascade failure on their own. But they didn't, Olivia replied, not even turning around. Because your algorithms were missing something. Kyle Thas felt something snap inside his carefully ordered understanding of the universe. Our calculations were perfect, peer-reviewed across 17 different calculation frameworks. We had margin for error, safety tolerances, redundancy protocols. Yeah, but you're not accounting for the actual physical space, Olivia interrupted, her tone suggesting she was explaining something obvious too, a particularly slow student. The real way materials respond. Real metal doesn't behave like your mathematical models suggest. It's got stress patterns, microfractures from manufacturing, slight compositional variations. Your manifold's bearing was fighting against itself because you optimized it based on theoretical perfection, not actual metal. There was a moment of silence, where everyone in the facility could feel the weight of that statement settling over them, like a physical force. Then Kyle Thas activated the emergency communication channel to Command Station. Senior Protocol Officer Sinara's voice emerged from the speaker, tense and commanding. "Status report. We're receiving impossible readings from your facility." "Engine test completed successfully," Kyle Thas heard himself saying. "All metrics exceed projections. However, there was an incident." "She's the only reason we still have a facility," Vexia interjected, her voice cutting across his explanation. The human consultant prevented a catastrophic cascade failure by manually adjusting the primary manifold bearing. She violated 7 safety protocols and prevented complete system destruction. A pause, then, "How is that possible?" "We're still determining that," Kyle Thas admitted. The conference expanded. 3 species representatives materialized on the comlink. The Vexthul Engineering Collective's leadership, a planetary council liaison, and someone from the sector authority. All demanding answers, all receiving the same confused response. A human had walked in, touched something, and made everything work better. Olivia reappeared in the observation bay doorway, having apparently decided her exit needed revision. She was holding a data tablet that Vexia had apparently handed to her. "So, like, she said casually. How often do your tests actually work? Silence. That often, huh? Olivia continued, scrolling through what appeared to be the historical project logs. Yeah, we have a saying back home about being so focused on preventing failure that you accidentally create it. You guys are optimizing for scenarios that don't exist instead of preparing for the ones that do. She looked up from the tablet. You're so afraid of one thing going wrong, you miss when something's going right. You build so many safety barriers that the system can't actually breathe. Then when something tries to work, it gets strangled by all your precautions. Vexia found herself speaking almost involuntarily. She's suggesting our methodology is fundamentally flawed. Olivia shrugged. I mean, yeah, isn't that obvious? Kael'thas realized, with a kind of clarity that felt like a physical force, that Olivia Smith wasn't panicking about what had happened. She wasn't marveling at it. She wasn't treating it as a crisis that needed analysis and careful study. She was treating it like Tuesday. Like this was just how problems worked. You felt them, you fixed them, you moved on. The entire authority structure built on algorithmic perfection suddenly felt very fragile. The facility emergency meeting had been going on for 96 minutes, and it had devolved into what could only be described as controlled chaos. 12 senior engineers from 4 different species crowded around the central conference table, all talking simultaneously, all arguing about protocols and violations, and how a human had somehow broken 13 different safety restrictions in sequence and improved the outcome every single time. Olivia stood in the center of the room, calmly eating something that might have been food or might have been strategic silence. She looked genuinely unbothered. Someone finally asked the question that everyone had been circling. What exactly were you thinking when you accessed the manifold? Olivia swallowed. I was thinking about Thanksgiving dinner. The silence that followed was profound. You know how you cook a turkey? She continued, apparently unconcerned with the fact that approximately 70% of the room had never encountered a Thanksgiving dinner in their lives. You follow a recipe perfectly. Exact temperature, exact time. Everything optimized for how poultry supposedly behaves. She gestured with her fork. But here's the thing. The oven's never exactly right. The burners aren't uniform. Your kitchen's temperature variations don't match the recipe's assumptions. So you feel it. You check it. You adjust. And sometimes you do something that makes absolutely no sense on paper. Like wrapping foil weird around the legs. Or opening the door more than you should. Opening the door lets the heat out, which should make it cook worse, except it doesn't because the moisture exchange was actually the problem. Vexia had stopped breathing. Metaphorically, her respiratory system hadn't actually ceased functioning, but her entire processing pattern had stalled into a single point of cognitive focus. But it works, Olivia said, because you're paying attention to the actual thing, not the plan. You're suggesting, Vexia said slowly, that our scientific method is incomplete. I'm suggesting your scientific method never met a turkey that fought back, Olivia replied. Kael'thas felt something fundamental shift in the room, not metaphorically, physically. Like reality itself had adjusted its axis. Someone pulled up the project history, every major achievement, every significant breakthrough. Engine efficiency increased by 7%? Olivia had suggested just trying it different, instead of optimizing existing parameters further. Water reclamation systems achieving 99.7% purity? She'd asked, why not backwards, when the standard approach had been stuck at 97% for 6 years. structural integrity of the cooling systems. She'd identified a load-bearing flaw that algorithms had flagged as within acceptable tolerance, but that would have caused catastrophic failure in real-world conditions. The pattern was undeniable. Humans, intuition-based problem-solving. Aliens had perfect data-based solving. Perfect data never equaled real-world conditions. Kael'thas found himself standing, though he didn't remember making the decision to stand. "We need to restructure how we approach collaborative research," he said. "This isn't anomaly. This is systematic." The communication channel to command station activated almost immediately. The approval came faster than it should have, faster than bureaucracy typically allowed. "Human consultants," the official decree stated, "are hereby classified as integral to all future research initiatives." Vexia looked at Olivia with something like understanding finally crystallizing behind her eyes. "We've been optimizing for scenarios that never occur, instead of preparing for the scenarios that do." "Cool," Olivia said, setting down her fork. "Anyway, when's lunch? This turkey metaphor made me hungry." The room stared at her. "What?" "I walked into a containment crisis. I fixed an engine. I just rewrote your entire research methodology with poultry advice. I think I've earned a meal." Kael'thas activated the facility communication system. "All departments, this is authorization. Stand down from emergency protocols. Restructure all procedures for human consultant integration." The galaxy, he realized, had just fundamentally shifted. A sector authority representative appeared on the comlink. "We're receiving reports that humanity has somehow become essential to advanced research protocols. Is this accurate?" Kael'thas looked at Olivia, who was still waiting for lunch. "Yes," he said. "If humans can solve advanced alien technology this simply, what else have they been solving unconsciously?" The question hung in the air, like the beginning of something vast, something inevitable, something that would change everything. Zara entered the observation deck with deliberate precision, her bioluminescent markings casting soft shadows across the console displays. Behind her moved 3 Kalinthar cubs, creatures that were simultaneously living tissue and computational matrix, part biological warmth and part artificial intelligence. They had never voluntarily approached anyone before. The cubs moved with synchronized curiosity, their sensory organs rotating toward the engine core that hummed with its newly perfect efficiency. Their movements were investigation, methodical, analytical, the kind of scan that bioengineered constructs performed when gathering data. Then one of them turned and looked directly at Olivia. It was a simple reorientation, a shift in attention, but it was deliberate, conscious. The cub approached her with something that might have been hesitation, might have been respect, might have been recognition. It climbed onto her shoulder with the delicate precision of something that understood distributed weight and pressure points. Olivia didn't flinch, didn't react with alarm or surprise. She simply existed, letting the cub settle into place like this was a completely normal occurrence. The second cub followed without hesitation. The third debated for approximately 4 seconds. Vexia could see the internal conflict represented in the flicker of its bioluminescent patterns, then climbed up to join its siblings. Purring filled the observation deck, not the aggressive, territorial purring of dangerous things. Genuine warmth, contentment. The sound that bioengineered creatures made when they'd recognized success and felt safe in proximity to it. Kael'thas stared. The cubs have never shown voluntary proximity to anyone. Their stress hormones are dropping, Vexia reported, her instruments tracking the biological cascades happening inside the cub's hybrid physiology. They're comfortable. That shouldn't be possible. They're threat assessment constructs. Comfort isn't in their behavioral protocol. Zara's voice emerged measured and thoughtful. The cubs recognize problem-solving patterns. They recognize success. They are drawn to... She paused, considering. They are drawn to completion. But as Olivia gently stroked one of the cubs, the creature's purring intensified, and something shifted in the observation deck's emotional atmosphere. This wasn't just recognition of success. This was connection. "Hey there, little buddy," Olivia said softly. "You did good work today." The cub turned its head toward her, and its purring reached a frequency that made the monitoring equipment register contentment as an actual measurable variable. "We all did good work," Olivia continued, stroking each cub in turn. "Every single one of us. The whole team." Kael'thas found himself speaking without intention. "She's acknowledging their contribution to the project. She's treating a bioengineered construct like a living being," Vexia observed. And there was something like wonder in her voice. And then Vexia understood something fundamental about humanity that no algorithm could have calculated. Humans didn't categorize success types. Success plus effort plus presence equaled worth acknowledging, regardless of origin. Whether biological, artificial, hybrid, or impossible. Whether the contribution came from a senior engineer or a bioengineered cub, or a human mechanic who solved problems by touching things. Olivia stood up, the cubs redistributing themselves across her shoulders and back. 3 bioengineered creatures completely content to perch on a human who had solved an impossible crisis with nothing but intuition and turkey metaphors. "So, when do we test the secondary systems?" she asked casually. "You should rest," Kael'thas suggested. "After the stress of the emergency protocols?" "Stress," Olivia interrupted. "That was just a Tuesday engine test. Lead the way. Show me what's next." She walked toward the laboratory exit, cubs purring against her shoulders, their bioluminescent patterns flickering in contented harmony. Every scientist she passed met her eyes. Every one of them saw the same thing. A human who belonged in this facility now. Not as a consultant, not as a guest, as part of the team. Later, Vexia and Kael'thas stood in the observation deck watching them disappear down the corridor. "The cubs chose her," Vexia said quietly. "They recognized something in her we're only beginning to understand," Kael'thas replied. "That humans don't separate work from care," Vexia continued. "They don't separate success from acknowledgement. They don't separate problem-solving from kindness." The purring echo lingered in the empty observation deck. And in that silence, 2 alien scientists understood that the galaxy had just become infinitely more complicated. And infinitely better. By the 3rd day, every department in the facility had been restructured. Engineers now worked in pairs. 1 alien following optimal parameters, 1 human checking if those parameters actually made sense in reality. Research teams added human workers to real-world test protocols, a classification that had never existed before because alien methodology had assumed real-world conditions were predictable. Kael'thas issued the facility-wide announcement personally. Collaborative protocols now require human presence for validation, not because humans are smarter, because humans think differently, not because humans are superior. Because humans complement algorithmic perfection. The Sector Authority Council met in emergency session and voted within 3 hours. Human consultants are hereby classified as integral research assets, the official decree read. Vexia had been the one to present the findings, her voice steady as she explained. Humanity's strength lies in adaptive problem-solving, not replacing our methods, completing them. The vote passed unanimously. Other species immediately began inquiring about human integration into their own research facilities. The balance of power in the sector had shifted, subtly but undeniably, toward collaborative advantage. But Olivia Smith didn't notice any of this. On the morning of day 4, she was back in the mechanics bay, making coffee that still tasted like burnt charcoal and broken dreams. 3 Kalanthar cubs followed her everywhere now, designated officially as project mascots, and unofficially as Olivia's constant companions. Kael'thas approached cautiously. Olivia, the council wants to meet with you. They're requesting your presence at the highest levels of authority. Cool, cool, Olivia replied, not even looking up. After I finish this coffee and these cubs destroy this intake manifold inspection. One of the cubs was indeed gnawing on a diagnostic cable with playful intensity, making the readings cascade in completely unreliable directions. Yeah, buddy, I know, Olivia said to the cub. It's inefficient. That's what I'm here for. She took a sip of terrible coffee, winced, and continued drinking it anyway. Vexia appeared in the doorway, her expression carrying the weight of 3 species approval. Your methods are being implemented across all divisions. That's great, Olivia said. Did it work? Your turkey approach increased efficiency by 34%. Of course it did. You were overthinking it. We were following optimal parameters, Vexia reminded her. Yeah, and the turkey was burning, Olivia countered. Sometimes optimal doesn't work. Sometimes you just gotta feel the actual problem instead of reading about the theoretical one. She took another sip of that terrible coffee, winced again, and yet continued drinking it. Cubs climbed into her lap with the casual familiarity of creatures that had made a permanent decision about where they belonged. So, Olivia said, scratching behind one cub's bioluminescent markings, what's the next crisis? Kael'thas exchanged a look with Vexia. We'll create some. Humanity should be challenged regularly. Perfect, Olivia grinned. I get overtime for that. In the council chamber, representatives from 12 different species sat around the conference table, all discussing the same impossible thing. They've changed how 3 species approach problem solving, one representative observed. In 1 week, another added, by simply thinking differently. What happens when we fully integrate their methodology? A third asked. No one had an answer. Back in the mechanics bay, Olivia stood before a young alien engineer, a Vexthul barely past their completion cycle, eager to learn the ways of proper research protocol. Feel the problem, Olivia was saying. Not think it. Feel it. Put your hands on the actual thing. Don't trust the readouts. Trust your senses. The engineer hesitated. But the instruments measure more accurately than biological sensation. Yeah, Olivia interrupted. And the instruments told you the bearing was fine. The instruments said everything was optimal. And the instruments were wrong. Because instruments only know what you program them to know. Your hands know what instruments never dreamed of. The young engineer placed their manipulators on the manifold and actually listened. Because Olivia was right, and everyone in the facility knew it now. The cubs purred contentedly from their perch on Olivia's shoulders, bioluminescent patterns flickering in approval. They were no longer remarkable. They were just part of the team now. Human and alien working side by side, not as novelty, but as baseline. Olivia complained about the coffee quality. Someone fixed it. A junior engineer who understood that treating a problem solver well meant addressing even the small problems. The engine hummed perfectly in the background, its test cycle complete, its metrics exceeding projections, its success measured not in dramatic revelation, but in quiet acceptance. Everything had changed because one human finished an engine test, and the cubs purred their approval. Because that apparently was all it took.